Hello there, Mandalorian and Grogu is finally here. I just got home. It is 20 to 3 in the morning. So I'm going to give you some very quick, spoiler-free thoughts of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Star Wars is back on the big screen, the first film in 6 or 7 years. And honestly, I had a pretty good time with it. I think this is a very, very fun movie, while at the same time being very, very uneven and a little bit messy. It's funny, after a mission, Sigourney Weaver's character says to Mando, "That was very messy, Mando," and that's kind of how I feel about this movie. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it, I had a lot of fun with it, but I did find it to be quite messy. Now, this is a completely self-contained story. I don't even think you need to have seen any of the Mandalorian TV show before going to see this. I think this is actually a perfect entry point for new fans coming to Star Wars. Yes, there's definitely some prior knowledge that might be needed here and there with certain characters and events, but for the most part, this is a very, very self-contained story. I've actually seen some criticism lobbied at this movie because of that. I actually don't see that being a criticism. I think that the fact that this is self-contained is kind of great. I think this movie is filled to the brim with fun action scenes. I think it's the movie's greatest strength. The opening scene, which is on the snow planet, which most people gathered at this point, is fantastic. It reminded me of an Indiana Jones movie where the beginning of the movie is sort of the end of a mission or adventure. There's some great stuff in this sequence. I really, really liked it. Fun shootouts with stormtroopers, a nice one-shot action scene within one of the AT-ATs. Vibes-wise, I think it does feel closest to Season 1 Mandalorian. I think the acting is fine across the board. It's fun to see Sigourney Weaver, Steve Blum voicing Zeb again. Pedro Pascal sometimes sounds like he's maybe phoning it in a little bit. He sometimes sounds a little bit dry and a little bit disconnected to the events around him, but he still gives a pretty decent performance, I think. And I'm always going to shout out Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder, who are the two stunt performers for The Mandalorian, basically what's doing all the action scenes. Shout out to them. Stunt people do not get enough recognition in this industry, and I'm glad that they are both properly credited in this movie because they're fantastic. I will say though that this movie is kind of a peaks and valley movie for me, where it has high highs, but then it dips down, and then it goes up again, and then it dips down again, and then it goes up again, and then it dips. I found that a lot throughout this movie. I think its pacing is probably one of its weaker aspects. One of the questions I see a lot about this movie is this just a couple of episodes of The Mandalorian stitched together? I would say no. I do think it feels like one long episode of The Mandalorian TV show, but I also did think it worked as a movie. It is hard to break away from that TV show mentality, but I do think it works as a quote-unquote movie, but I did also feel like, yeah, this could have just been a 2-hour episode of the show. Now in this movie, Mando and Grogu are hunting down Imperial Remnants. They have to take on some bounty hunters, the Hutts, and more. It's a fun ride. I will say, however, though, that if you're coming into this movie really, really wanting to delve deeper into the characters of Din Djarin and Grogu, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. I don't really think there's a whole lot of development for these characters in this movie. I'm not gonna say that the characters regressed at all, but I do think that they kind of stalled. Din Djarin is still following his old ways of, if his helmet comes off, he has to deal with that, which I feel like The Mandalorian Season 3 sort of should have wrapped up with the, Mandalore being retaken, the Darksaber, a symbol of old archaic ways being destroyed. I found like that sort of stuff maybe should have been left behind, and Mando and the Mandalorians are sort of entering a new era, but apparently not. I found that to be kind of disappointing. There is a sequence that I've heard a lot of people say was quite boring, where it's sort of Grogu on his own for a little period of time. I actually found that to be a very charming part of the movie. I really quite enjoyed that. I will say this movie gave us a lot more Rotter the Hutt than I expected. I really came away enjoying his character a lot. I think it might be an acquired taste of a character, if that makes sense. At first I was like, I'm not sure I'm buying into Rotter the Hutt here. I'm not sure this is working for me, but at some point early on, it did click for me, and I really enjoyed Jeremy Allen White as Rotter the Hutt. You do get a lot of him in this movie as well. He actually has second billing in this movie. That's how much you get of him. I think Embo showing up, the bounty hunter from the trailer, was really, really cool. The Hutt Twins are disgusting and deplorable as ever. There's some fun X-Wing and Starfighter sequences. The Anzellans are fantastic as always. But as much fun as I had with those things, I do think that the kind of weak character development for our main characters, along with some pretty janky pacing, some edits that I didn't quite didn't like, and just an overall kind of weak script bring the movie down a little bit for me. I still really enjoyed it and had a fun time with it, but there were a lot of moments where I was just like, this could have been better, or this could have been a bit stronger. I feel like Rotta's character gives the exact same speech to Mando in 2 different scenes, just things like that. At the end of the day, I do think this is a fun Star Wars movie. It's very self-contained. I personally like that it doesn't set up the next big thing. Like I said, I've seen people upset at the fact that this movie doesn't tease what's to come next. It doesn't connect to Ahsoka Season 2 or whatever like that. I am personally A-okay with that. I don't want Star Wars to be like the MCU, where the biggest thing that anyone talks about afterwards is what the post-credit scene was, or how many cameos were in the movie. I think this movie smartly strays away from that kind of thing, and I actually give it a lot of credit for that. I think the best way I can sum it up is the review that Roger Ebert gave The Mummy back in 1999. I'm just going to read you this one quote from it. "I cannot argue for the script, the direction, the acting, or even the mummy itself, but I can say that I was not bored, and sometimes I was unreasonably pleased." And that mostly sums up my feelings about The Mandalorian and Grogu. I had a great time watching this movie. I'm happy I went to the midnight screening. It was a ton of fun seeing it with a bunch of other people, but there were those moments that did bring it down. The weak character development, the somewhat weak script and story, and the uneven pacing throughout. So yeah, overall, I had a fun time with it. Not groundbreaking by any means, but it was a good time at the movies, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. Hopefully at a reasonable hour. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Very quick review. I'm gonna talk more about this movie in depth later on with spoilers and all. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure you follow me here and over on TikTok. I love talking about Star Wars, and I'll be talking about this movie a ton more in the future. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you, always.